Welcome back to a news bulletin. In Brazil, the COVID-19 death toll nears 50,000 as more than 1,000 died overnight. In the US, the death count has surged to nearly 118,000 with over 2.2 million infections. Globally, the COVID-19 death count has crossed 464,000 with over 8.7 million infections. Further details in this report.
As the world struggles to contain COVID-19 spreading, Latin America continues to remain the flashpoint of the virus. The region has passed 2 million cases, with Brazil becoming the second worst hit country by COVID-19. As cases pile up in Chile, the government has revised its death toll to over 7,000 from the previously known 4,295.
In relation to those who died due to COVID-19 without laboratory confirmation, that is, deaths in which COVID-19 is a possible or a probable cause, the number rises by 3,069.
Many European countries are easing lockdown restrictions, while Germany struggles to contain the recent outbreak at a slaughterhouse. Over in China, authorities reported 25 new domestically transmitted cases of the virus, but experts believe Beijing's effective response is a contribution to the global course of human rights.
China, you had a huge mobilization of the whole of society to save people's lives. China paid a very severe economic price for this. So this is not happening in the United States. The American people are just being allowed to die. That's why you've had such enormous demonstrations and protests in the United States. 20 million people in America have also lost their jobs.
In the African continent, the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases has crossed 286,000 as death toll climbs to nearly 7,700.
The death toll from COVID-19 in Pakistan has topped 3,500 after 119 more died overnight. The Health Ministry says nearly 5,000 tested positive in the last 24 hours, raising the tally to over 176,000. The ministry said nearly 68,000 patients have recovered so far, while there are still over 105,000 active cases. The southern province of Sindh leads in the number of infections, with over 67,000 cases, while Punjab is second with nearly 66,000 cases. Meanwhile, international flight operations to and from all airports of Pakistan have resumed except Gwadar and Turbat airports. Pakistan has strongly condemned the extrajudicial killings of civilians by the Indian troops in occupied Kashmir. In a statement, the Foreign Office said the Indian forces have martyred over 110 Kashmiris in fake encounters during the past 5 months. It said the BJP leadership is directly responsible for these politically motivated killings of Kashmiris. The Foreign Office said the international community must take immediate notice of Indian atrocities in the valley. This comes as Indian forces martyred another 8 Kashmiris in the last 2 days alone. In another news, Pakistan has reopened 2 key trade routes with Afghanistan on the request of the Kabul administration. In a statement, the Foreign Office said border terminals at Torkham and Chaman have been opened for transit trade and exports to Afghanistan. It said the third border terminal at Ghulam Khan will be opened on 22nd June. The months-long closure of border crossings led to huge losses for traders, especially Afghan fruit merchants. Pakistan and Afghanistan share 18 crossing points, but Torkham and Chaman are the most commonly used. Yemeni southern separatists have taken control of military and police camps in Yemen's Socotra archipelago, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Clashes erupted between the government and Southern Transition Council last week after both accused each other of violating the Riyadh Agreement. Fighting started in the strategic Socotra archipelago yesterday as the two sides battled for control of the island's capital. Condemning the separatist attack, Socotra Governor Ramzi Mahrouz said his forces will fight back. The Southern Transitional Council has also claimed arresting several military personnel, including an Air Force commander. Egypt has threatened direct military intervention if Libya's government of national accord forces attack Libyan strategic city of Sirte. In a televised address, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said Egypt can intervene in Libya to protect its western border. Al-Sisi said Egyptian forces will act on the request of the only legitimate elected authority in Libya, which is the House of Representatives under LNA. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and the UAE have supported al-Sisi's statements, saying Egypt has the right to protect its borders and people. Libya's GNA has rejected the warning, calling it interference in the country's affairs. The GNA has recently made major gains in the war against LNA after acquiring Turkey's support. In the UK, 3 people have been killed and as many critically wounded after a stabbings rampage at a park in the southern town of Reading. Police said a 25-year-old man has been arrested at the scene on suspicion of murder. They said the incident is currently not being treated as terrorism. Police said there is no intelligence to suggest any further danger to public. However, people are urged to remain vigilant. They said incident was not connected to an earlier Black Lives Matter protest at the park. Lawmaker from Matroda said incident is deeply distressing to Hold Town as it took place at a park often used by people for social gatherings.
It's a quiet park just off the town centre, which has been used for many years for people to go and sit in at the weekend. It's peaceful. People were sitting, observing social distancing, just chatting in groups when this incident happened. And it must have been absolutely shocking, and it is deeply distressing to the whole town and our wider community.
Earlier, hundreds of demonstrators gathered at anti-racism rallies across UK cities, including London, Manchester, Edinburgh and Glasgow, despite a ban on large gatherings. Now, during the Black Lives Matter protest in the US, 1 person has been killed and another wounded in a shooting incident in Seattle's Capitol Hill area. The police say they are investigating the incident. Black Lives Matter protesters occupied the area after the custodial killing of George Floyd triggered nationwide protests. The hospital said a 19-year-old male died shortly after the arrival, while the other was in critical condition. Meanwhile, North Carolina's governor has ordered the removal of Confederate monuments after demonstrators pulled 2 statues down. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, President Donald Trump criticized anti-racism protest as he addressed a smaller than expected re-election rally.
The unhinged left-wing mob is trying to vandalize our history, desecrate our monuments, our beautiful monuments. Tear down our statues and punish, cancel, and persecute anyone who does not conform to their demands for absolute and total control. We're not conforming. That's why we're here, actually.
More from US President Donald Trump, who says he will announce new restrictions on visas within a couple of days to block the entry of certain foreign workers. In an interview, Trump said the new restrictions will protect Americans struggling with a job market crushed by the pandemic. The US president said there will be a very few exclusions from the new restrictions. Major American tech companies have urged Trump to refrain from blocking the flow of foreign workers into the country, saying it would hurt the economy. Earlier in April, the president ordered a temporary block on some foreigners from permanent residence in the US. A US judge has blocked the Trump administration's bid to halt the publication of former security advisor John Bolton's book. In his ruling, the judge said Bolton's conduct raised grave national security concerns, but a ban is not an appropriate remedy. He also said an injunction will be too late to stem the harm. In a tweet shortly after the decision, President Donald Trump said Bolton must pay the price for releasing classified information. Among several allegations, Bolton wrote that Trump pleaded for help from China to win re-election in 2020. Last September, Trump ousted Bolton after 17 months as a national security advisor. We're now taking a short break, but stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. In Mexico, 215 bodies have been found in 9 mass graves in the state of Jalisco between the months of January and May. At a virtual press conference, Jalisco state prosecutor said the graves were located in the Guadalajara metropolitan area. The prosecutor said analysis of 5 graves is still pending due to a lack of staff, unearthing which could increase the body toll. The official said a large number of bodies have already been identified and sent to their families. Violence crime has continued in one of the deadliest countries in the world despite confinement due to the coronavirus pandemic. Official data suggests there have been over 287,000 murders in the country since 2006 military crackdown on organized crime. Hundreds of people have protested against racism and police violence in French capital Paris. The protesters also marched on the home of Senegalese man Lamine Dieng, who died in a police van in 2007. Activists urged the removal of Louis Faidherbe monument, who was accused of burning African villages and massacring people under Napoleon III. Protests have been taking place around the world against racism and police brutality following the custodial death of George Floyd in the US. Serbians are heading to the polls to elect a new parliament in Europe's first national election since coronavirus lockdowns. Polling stations will be equipped with face masks and hand sanitizers for the use of the country's electorate of almost 6.6 million. But many are expected to skip voting, partly due to fears of infecting the virus. Opinion polls show Alexander Vucic's conservative Serbian People's Party set to get about 50% of the vote. His popularity is boosted by widespread public approval over the government's handling of the pandemic. The turnout could also be hit by boycott campaigns of opposition parties, who say the vote will not be fair due to President Vucic's firm grip over the media. For Syrian refugees crossing Turkey to enter Greece is a huge task as they face Greek authorities pushing them back. But even once they somehow manage to enter Greece, their problems are far from over. Let's find out more in this report.
28-year-old Syrian Mohammed Al-Farhan arrived in Greece through a boat from Turkey in 2017 and lives in a tiny apartment in Athens with his wife and 2 kids. He got asylum late in 2019, but his recognized refugee status comes with new responsibilities. Al-Farhan must find a new accommodation and a job because his support programs as an asylum seeker have come to an end. He has to leave his apartment at the end of June. Finding a job is hard enough under the country's current economic situation, but under the lockdown, it is impossible.
The thought of having to leave our house, it would be horrible. Very bad for us. We came out of a war that destroyed us emotionally, and leaving the program will destroy us further because we will end up in the street. Imagine being on the streets with your children and your family.
In an effort to speed up the asylum process, the government has processed some 23,000 applications in just March and April alone, despite the lockdown. Refugees who have been granted asylum are leaving islands such as Lesbos for Athens. Migration Ministry General Secretary Manos Legatidis says refugees in Athens need to make way for newly arriving asylum seekers. He argues while being asylum seekers, recognized refugees were aware that their assistance will end and they were given time to prepare.
There needs to be a way for them to deal with their daily lives. The answer is surely not for the state to support them in every aspect of their daily lives. That would be institutionalization, which is what we want to avoid. We want to give them the opportunity to make the next steps in their lives which they have chosen.
Family reunification schemes with EU countries and the transfer of unaccompanied minors have picked up after the ease in lockdown last month. But Logothidis says the EU states need to share the burden even further.
Most parts of the world are witnessing the annual solar eclipse today that will create a ring of fire around the sun in most parts of the world. The event occurs when the moon covers the center of the sun, making the outer edge of the sun around the moon appear as a fire ring. Today's eclipse is rare as it concurs with the annual summer solstice, the longest day when Earth's pole is tilted at its maximum towards the sun. Celestial experts have advised people not to view eclipse sun with the naked eye, even for a very short duration of time. They say direct exposure may cause permanent damage to the eyes, leading to blindness even when the moon covers most portion of the sun. This is all for now for our top stories. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.